Yes. This is the beginning of the final month of the first year of Consciousness Boot Camp, as well as our spiritual service. And there are a few people here who are going to be coming to CBC 1 next year, but you get the like the trailer of the movie or the the preview. Because this is where it goes. But you could come here 100 times and still not be there, because it's becoming. And as once I blurted out, it's not becoming became, it's becoming. So it's a never-ending process, which life is. Life is the never-ending process of becoming. So obviously we can never finish this chapter, can we? And for those of you who believe that there's something after death, which I don't know, but if there is, it'll still be becoming, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. If you think that you're going to get a rest on the other side, you're sadly mistaken. From all the connection I have to the consciousness on the other side, is they're working their asses off too, and they're also in the process of becoming, because it's the process of evolution. I mean, what's the point if we're not evolving and growing? And so I always thought that heaven, the typical vision of what heaven is, would probably bore me to death. I'd enjoy it like for about 10 minutes, and then I'd get antsy. You know, there's nothing to do. Before we get into the material, I'm going to ask James to guide us in a meditation.
All right. On the theme of becoming.
I don't know, James. You'll just have to becoming and find out.
Okay, sounds good. And Todd, can you hear me okay on the recording in the Ustream? Okay, good. Okay, in that case, everybody, please make yourself comfortable where you are. I'd like to do a little process to help you go into a deeper relaxed state. I'd like you to extend your arms straight out from you in a relaxed kind of holding them out there fashion. And very soon I'm going to invite you to let them just plop down to your lap or pillow or wherever you have on your lap. And when you do, just let yourself plop down in relaxation, regardless of the external sounds. Regardless of the external sounds, if you can hear me. Won't it be a relief? Now drop those arms down and relax. That's it. Really relaxing and letting go. Feels so good. And with each exhalation, just exhale a relaxing, peaceful feeling down through the body, all the way to the feet. With each exhalation, it's like a stream of energy flowing through the body, washing away all tensions, relaxing away all cares. Nothing else matters right now, but just simply relaxing. Relaxing in the process of living. Now just imagine that you're on some kind of float or small boat, just floating down a stream or river. And that there's a current in that stream that gently guides your flow to your boat, this way and that. You're feeling so utterly and completely relaxed. And since the river is flowing in a certain direction, you can trust that it'll keep you moving. Or at least for the time being, it's keeping you moving. And then imagine that this structure that you're floating in becomes one of those rafts for whitewater rafting. And you have paddles, and you also have an imaginary support team. And now you're ready to face whatever challenges come your way. with a sense of adventure, a sense of welcoming, a sense of allowance. And you release any goals that you may have had about getting to a certain place by a certain time, or accomplishing a certain thing, but rather just allowing the currents to take you. Imagine now going over the first whitewater section, relatively gentle, but you see that you're up to the challenge, you and your team. And then you continue on. And with each whitewater experience, the challenges change. It's a new and different challenge each time. What a wonderful process of discovery. This is a metaphor for life. That each moment of each day, there's a new and different, interesting challenge. It might feel challenging, it might feel difficult, it might feel problematic. But you can just as easily adopt an attitude of, this is an opportunity for my growth, my stretching of my capacity. So but recall now whatever challenges are going on in your life right now. And see yourself approaching those as in the whitewater rafting experience. Trusting that life's current is bringing you what you need at the time for your own growth and transformation. That you're going from one transition to another transition. You're moving from transformational moment to transformational moment, where each time you have an opportunity to evolve and to handle a situation with more knowledge and experience and handling it perhaps differently than before. And each time you do that, you're stretching and growing, and you're able to feel at peace and satisfied. And more you're allowing yourself to tune in, checking in with Source, and asking the question, what will most effectively unleash the power of Source on earth in each and every situation of your life when you're faced with a choice? And waiting for that yes or no answer, whether this decision, that decision, will most effectively unleash the power of the Source on earth. And then being committed to following that guidance. And by checking in and then following the guidance, you can feel at peace with your choice, with your decision. Trusting that whatever the outcome, it's for your highest good and growth, and for the highest good of the whole. As increasingly as you move through life, you are more and more an agent of divine consciousness, of higher consciousness. As you're increasingly guided by your intuition, by your sense of what is for the highest good of all, including yourself. And that you welcome each challenge, because as you overcome each of those challenges, you're also benefiting the collective. You're working on challenges that are universal in many ways for all of humanity. And each time you successfully work with a challenge, even if it just means coming to terms with something and having allowance for it, you're benefiting all of humanity. So allow yourself to feel a sense of satisfaction in this, a sense of inner peace. Moving through life as a transformational moment, from moment to moment to moment. And welcoming those moments as you move along. Very soon I'll invite you to bring your awareness back into the room. And you bring with you whatever you have been experiencing during this time. As we continue on the theme of becoming, of living life as a transformational series of moments. Now I'd like you to be aware of your physical body and wiggle your toes. And send your attention down to your feet, to your toes, and affirm that you're grounded in your physical body. How good it feels to be alive, to express through a physical body in this physical world. And now take a deep breath. Feeling more wide awake now. You might begin to move the muscles of your body, you might begin to stretch a little bit. And very soon I'll invite you to open your eyes. And now open your eyes and bring your awareness back into the room, feeling peaceful, calm. relaxed, refreshed.
The book, please.
Yeah. It's the book.
Platform 9, becoming, relaxing into the process of living. As I said in the book, I love this platform, at least in theory. You know, when I talk about it, it sounds really spiritual. You know what I mean? Really evolved. Very transcendental. The living of it, of course, is a bit more challenging. And yet, there is something in even the words, because, of course, as most of you know by now, this book came to me, or this idea, the whole Living with Reality program came to me, and the platforms came to me, and I wrote down becoming, and I thought, really? That sounds cool. And there was something that instinctively I loved about that title. I loved, and there's something that intuitively I think we love about the process. Just the idea that we can relax into the process of living and really focus on the inner evolution is something that I think that each one of us really desires in our hearts, or we wouldn't be here. I think it's what has impelled and motivated the spiritual challenge. It's what makes us admire those people who we believe have achieved that level. Like, you know, someone like Yogananda is an example, right, of someone who we believe has achieved that ability to be so connected to divine consciousness. And there's something magical about it. And of course what we want is the magic part. Like, oh, I'll get an instantaneous healing if I put my finger on this tree. Or that's the part we kind of go for. In our more childish, infantile mode, in our very elevated spiritual mode, we realize that we're beyond that. But, but there is something magical. And here is the wonderful irony of it all. It's, in a way, it is true. It is magical. Becoming is magical. Being on the other side of ego reactivity really is magical. And we don't need to manifest, you know, dancing girls in gauze outfits, or or other mystical symbols, or whatever it is that we're looking for, that we think is going to capture that spiritual experience. But that really, it is the process of becoming nothing. As I had a very unpopular video that I did about a year and a half ago called Becoming Nothing. And that is the magic. And to begin to see the universe working itself out through us and others, and understanding that, watching it play out over and over, beyond our ego's grasp, is something very, very magical. Yet when our wills and desires and egos are thwarted in the moment, it's hard to feel. It's only later that when we sit back and say, now wasn't that amazing how that worked out? Then we sit there and we're just all so spiritual again, right? Yeah. Wow, that really was something, how that all came together. But in the process is, what the hell is this? And I'm so angry, and this is, I've had it, and I can't take it anymore, and you know, all that stuff. Those are the two sides. And we want to be able to live more and more on the other side. To be able to know in the moment, despite everything inside us that's screaming, this cannot be, this should not happen, this is wrong, I can't handle it, or whatever it is, that more and more of us lives in the other dimension and looks down, I don't mean looks down in a condescending way, looks at that part of us that's still completely caught up in ego, which is a lot of us, and can have compassion for that other self that hasn't really grounded yet in the higher dimension, and say, I understand. I understand. I understand. It certainly is scary when you're in a body. You can get hurt. You can get hurt physically. You can get hurt emotionally. You can get hurt spiritually. It's scary. And it's understandable that you're trying to control everything. And yet, that only creates incredible amount of stress. We've gone through Platform 8 to the best of our ability up to this point of becoming not knowing, where we start releasing agendas and releasing the need to know, which of course is part of the need to control. And every other platform we have worked up to this point, from becoming oneness to becoming mutually supportive and co-creative and accountable and so on, every platform has led us to this moment where we can actually begin the next phase of our journey, where we start to identify with higher consciousness instead of identifying with the ego. Up to this point, we are so trapped by ego consciousness, not out of any bad quality of ours, or because we're not good people or we don't try, but we haven't yet learned how to transcend that domination of the bondage of self, as some call it. And we've been working on it. You know, we've been trying to retrain and reprogram our egos to let go, to bring our egos to the place that our ego starts telling us to ask for divine guidance. And we start to tip the balance. And we've done that together because, as difficult as that is to do, for most of us, it is impossible to do by ourselves. We need the collective support in order to do this. We need to live in a world that supports this, even if that world is only 2 or 3 people at a time, in little pockets everywhere, because we need that kind of support. Why? Because we are one. It's very difficult to be the only healthy cell in the body that says, well, hey, I'm going to save this body, and you've got one healthy cell. It's tough. You know, that's a lot for a little cell. But you get all the cells working together, you know, you got a chance. So that's where we are now. We're at the place where we begin to have a chance to win. And when I say to win, you know, I don't mean to win in a competition. To win peace. We have a chance. It's not a guarantee. But we have a language, we have tools, we have support, we have discipline, self-discipline that we've been developing over the years. Self-awareness, 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 that obnoxious word. And what did you do? 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 It's like, okay, that is our greatest tool. And we've been working so hard to get to this point that we have a chance. So as we go through this platform this month, Becoming, we need to be extremely aware that this is turning the universe literally on its head. And we're not going to do it perfectly. Would someone please pour me some of this water? Thank you. So, I'd like to go through the 4 levels of becoming very briefly, because at the end of our spiritual service, thank you, I would like to take some time, take a break and come back and actually have a meditative experience together where we go into that divine consciousness. So that's what I think we're doing. But as you know, I don't know what we are going to do until after we've done it. So I'd like to go briefly through the 4 levels of becoming become. The first level is that it's a never-ending process. This means that we never really arrive at any end point because life is a series of transitions. And this is so obvious, and yet how it eludes us. It's baffling, isn't it? Mm-hmm. We always think that whatever this particular goal is, that when it's achieved, somehow or other, we're going to relax, and everything's going to be all right. Right? Mm-hmm. When I finish kindergarten, you know, when I get the new car, when I get that job, when I have a boyfriend, probably when I die. Come right in. I think we need a few more chairs. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm up to the very beginning of Becoming Becoming, where I'm talking about life is a series of transitions. And we don't like that, because we want to feel that we can get somewhere and then we can relax. And of course, the favorite example is when you get married. Like somehow or other, what is that song? My lonely days are over, you know. And you know, we think somehow that our problems have been solved when they have just only begun. Or other foolish people, they work so hard to have the baby, like that really is going to solve something, right? And every transition is simply a transition to the next transition, because it's a process. Life is a never-ending process. And life is about growth and change, life and death, life and death. You know, the body is born, it's already dying. And those of us who lived long enough to see the many springs know that spring will always be followed by summer and fall and winter. And even in that very moment of joy when we have new life, we know that contained within it is the end, which will then just bring us back to new beginnings. Whether we think that we reincarnate or we think that we become worm food, whatever it is, we will still be recycled in some way, and it never ends. Some of us think that it ends when we retire. For most of us, we're very quickly disabused of that notion, both because our income has dropped dramatically and now we have new challenges, because we're bored, or we have so many aches and pains that we wish we were busy enough to not notice them. And yet, I mean, all of this is very obvious, right? This is not complicated thinking. And yet, we live in the delusion that we're going to have resolution. Oh, I can relax now. Now, and we look forward to these moments. And what really is the problem about this is that we get so fixated on the result of that moment that we are not preparing ourselves spiritually for the reality that it's only a transition to the next transition. It's so common for people to get all caught up in the wedding that they indebt themselves and have lost the capacity to function financially because they put all of that into this moment, this symbolic moment of sacred union where they're so happy, and of course they're not. unless they've been drinking a lot, or really are very evolved. Because it's really all the anxiety about this, and my mother-in-law is arguing with the cousin and all of that. I mean, this is reality. And then the day is over and all we have is the bills. And we wonder what the hell we were thinking. Or worse, we have the husband. I don't know about you, but I've been in those situations where after the wedding I looked at the guy and I said, what was I thinking? Did I really want to get married that badly? All right, so I can see there's a few other people who know what I'm talking about. Thank you. I love it. I don't want to be the only idiot in the room. Okay, so that's the first level of becoming, is to realize that it's just a series of transitions, and it never ends. And the sooner we get it, the sooner we will stop creating symbolic moments where the process will end, and we will stop expecting it to end, and we will be more relaxed into the process. Because God said to me, you better start getting used to the process, Beth. In fact, he may have said, you better start loving the process or liking it, because that's all there is. And I didn't like that. I didn't like it 30 years ago, and I don't like it now. I want resolution. Ooh. Now, on the second level, becoming means that although we can have goals, we are always moving toward an unknown destination. Goals. I started talking about that last month in Becoming Not Knowing. You know, your goal is to get to the bathroom before you pee in your pants, but you end up tripping on your way and you end up in the hospital. You thought you were going to the bathroom, but you're really going to the hospital. And that's the way it is. Goals are there to impel forward motion. But where you are really going is completely out of your hands. Oh, I got a scholarship to Harvard because my goal is to become president. Where are you really going? So you start off going to Harvard. And you get pregnant on the way. And you end up in a homeless shelter where you meet a very, very advanced spiritual person who'll teach you more about life than you could ever have learned in Harvard. But they're carrying the flesh-eating monster disease and you die. I mean, you know, you don't... And we really think our goals have meaning, don't we? Yeah. And in the book, and I'm not going to do this here, but I go through one irony after another about all of our goals and what happens to us when we achieve them and when we don't achieve them. And so I really invite you, when you read this, to study this carefully, because we have an idea that the accomplishment of our goal is going to give us self-esteem and well-being. But as I go through example after example after example, it shows that very often achieving that goal does the opposite. Or we will not achieve that goal, and because we haven't achieved our goal, we are judging ourselves rather than being in total acceptance. You know, it's the story about my goal was to become a doctor, and did I become a doctor, or did I get some women pregnant and become a salesman instead? And what happens? And how is our self-esteem if we're really attached to that was the goal, when we don't want to admit the truth is that we would have made a lousy doctor anyway, and you know, it's a relief to us and the whole world that we never got to medical school. Or we did become a doctor, but we hated it, so we end up becoming alcoholic, and we kill 6 people. Or we spend our whole lives in a profession that eats us up alive, and when we're 65, we become hippies and drop acid. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, what is the relationship between the goal that our egos have set for us, or may not even be our own egos? It may have been the ego of my father who wanted me to become a doctor, that I didn't have enough differentiation in myself to be able to look at him and say, Dad, I want to be a carpenter. And I've seen this. I actually had a client who became a doctor when he really wanted to be a carpenter. But he did it because of his father. And there was a goal. And so what is the relationship between inner peace and true well-being and self-esteem and those goals, unless we're extremely self-aware? And we can see what is truly motivating our goals, and that we're able to live in the not knowing and be able to pick up or drop that goal as we are guided. And there's nothing wrong with having started with some goal. It got us out of bed that morning. But we need to be continually in the process of asking for divine guidance and being self-aware to realize whether that goal was really supposed to take us this way or that way. And of course there's the famous story in the book about our goal is to go to Paris and what happens to us and how we end up 20 years later in Paris, but in a very different situation. And that, understanding that life really is a journey towards an unknown destination is what makes it so grand, and yet our egos are so attached. I mean, as absurd as it sounds, people are starting their babies' college funds before they're even out of the womb these days. Now, when I was growing up in the 17th century, people didn't have that kind of money. So the goal was, can I get enough food on the table? But now we're already planning the child's soccer team performance when they're 3 years old. And I mean, I see it. It's insane what people do with their children today, and how they drive their children, how they drive themselves to make their children something way before the child even has the capacity to know themselves. But you can't have life be an unknown destination. After all, don't you have to have decided by the time you're 10 years old where you're going to college and what you're doing? Because the alternative is that they're going to become a drug dealer, obviously. There isn't anything else in between. And maybe you come from a family where being the best drug dealer is the goal. You know, the one who makes the most money. Or your goal is to make sure that your child is never a bum like you were, or whatever your goal is for that child. You don't even let the child have an unknown destination. And there's so much shame that's associated with not reaching our goals because we are such a goal-oriented culture. My goal was to lose 50 pounds before the wedding, someone else's wedding. I don't want to be seen in those photos unless I can get into that dress. You know, when you talk about it and you think about it, it's crazy, isn't it? You don't ask your body, what's your goal? You know, do you want to lose 50 pounds? Is it healthy for you to lose 50 pounds? Do you even like the dress? It's my goal. Because I have it in my head that somehow that's better than what life brings me. Rather than doing what's right, which is feed my body correctly, give it the exercise, the nurturing, the love it needs, and let it be what it's supposed to be, whatever size it's supposed to be, however it is supposed to look. And that is what I'm going to find out by doing all those healthy things. And even then, doing healthy things for my body becomes the next goal, which is wonderful, but in the process of doing that, I may find myself doing ridiculous dieting, you know, that really isn't healthy. Or I become crazy. I become obsessed with dieting instead of being obsessed with food. Great. And then the unexpected results of achieving a goal may be so negative. If we don't let go of goals and agendas, we are not making room for the miraculous, and we can't become becoming, because we've already set up the plan for our lives and nothing exciting or interesting or different can happen. I can't go to the Peace Corps and work in Guatemala, that's from my era, if I have the goal that I'm going to be a pediatrician by the time I'm 27. I can't interrupt. I can't take that year off to bicycle around Europe. I can't take off 3 years to have a miserable marriage, which will teach me something and turn me into a completely different person. So at the end of it, I am so much more evolved than I was before. I can't do any of those things because I've got a goal, and I have to meet it. It's very funny, actually, because when I think about my own life, I started college when I was 16 because I was kind of a child prodigy, and I graduated when I was 25. It took me 9 years. What I say about myself is I was a child prodigy that turned into a late bloomer. And nothing that I ever went to school for have I ever used anyway. And everything that I do, I have learned in completely different ways. I never got out of being in college anyway. But I'm not saying that it was a bad experience. I did end up going to school and going to grad school and all of that eventually, but I left that too to make the revolution. I didn't finish my PhD, and who cares? One fewer history teacher. And I think about how miraculous my life is compared to what I could have conceived of at the time that I created the goal. Because at that time, I had the narrow vision of who I was. When you're 5 years old, you don't know what's possible. When you're 25, you don't know what's possible. When you're 105, you don't know what's possible. I don't care what age we are, we still don't know, because we are not making room for the miraculous, which is beyond our conscious minds, beyond our ego's limited vision of who we could be, what life really is, and what the world is. And that's one of the sad things about getting stuck on the goal. Not that there's anything wrong with having one, but don't get attached to it, because we can only conceive that goal out of the narrow, limited vision that we are capable of at the time we make it. The only thing I can imagine being is a mom, or a doctor, or an architect, or whatever, a guru. When really it's better to be a gas station attendant. And I didn't know that until I was 72 and got my first gas station attendant job. Because that's, you know, the fumes alone keep me high. I don't know what. But, do you know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, we can't, and yet we do. We sit here in this fear-based, narrow, limited, ego-constrained universe, which we call our minds and ourselves, and we're trying to plot out a future from that place without knowing what the world is going to be like and what's out there. Those of us who have spiritual experiences or mystical experiences on a regular basis, you know, can say to people who don't, but you haven't experienced, and they'll say it doesn't exist. And I say, no, you just haven't experienced it yet. And I always say yet. You just haven't experienced it yet. And who knows the realms of consciousness that go beyond what I've experienced, and I want to know what they are. I'm always looking for and I don't mean getting high, but I mean really wondering what that is, and what that is. And I'm so grateful that I can't even say that I'm wondering what that is. I mean in the very abstract, what that could be like. What could be beyond what I've already experienced? Well, how can I know? Until I have that experience. And the more of those experiences I have, the more I think, wow, I wonder what else there is. Now, this is the point of the book where the ego blurts out, excuse me, I have something I'm just burning to say at this point. Okay, this sounds like a lot of great talk, but let's get real. Who wants to fall and break their leg? Who wants to get cancer instead of going on vacation? Who wants to end up a bum instead of a doctor? This book is called Living with Reality, and I'm beginning to think of this as a hoax. It's just more fairy tale thinking as far as I'm concerned. Give me a good goal. Give me success. Give me admiration any day. Then I reply, excuse me, I'm not done with this chapter yet. Hold your judgment till we get to level 3, living life as a transformational moment. The ego says, whatever. Okay. I have a final thought in here about about people with no goals. There is nobody with no goals. I don't care who you are, you always have a goal. The bum under the bridge has a goal, which is how to get another bottle of wine, or how to make it through the night. We always have goals. Just don't get attached to them. That's all right. Level 3, living life as a transformational moment. This is another hideous reality that gives a lot of relief on the other end. This is like the next level. So, all right, we get it. It doesn't make any difference how many goals we make. Life is going to do what it's going to do anyway, and all right, we get that. We can relax. And so, but still, isn't this better than that? You know, isn't this outcome better than that outcome? Wouldn't it be better if I could only get physically well, or whatever? Well, if you believe her, instead of life being a series of events leading to an outcome, life is a series of challenges leading to transformation. And that's it. So, you know, am I ever going to become a doctor? Am I going to save and if you do, oh my God, the hours you have to work and the sleep deprivation, and you know, it's not what it's meant to be anyway. But even if you do all of those things, that isn't really the point of life anyway. The point of life is transforming. So every moment is a challenge, and it's a transformational moment where we have an opportunity to choose a different response. That's it, guys. That's it. This is what it's about. Life is not a fountain. Life is a series of transformational moments where we get a chance to react the same old way, or to react differently and to respond differently. Is that about as unglamorous as it gets? But what that does for us, how that liberates us, is that we don't need anything in particular to happen on the outside to feel like we've had a good day. You know, at the end of the day, you sit down and say, that day really sucked. You know what I mean? My kids were disrespectful, my employee quit, or I got fired, or, I broke my leg, or whatever it is. I didn't lose 50 pounds, whatever it is that I think. And that today's really sucked. And then you sit and you think about it differently. You say, okay, now I'm becoming. I'm going to be very spiritual. And now, how many transformational moments did I blow today? How many opportunities did I have to feel different and be different? When my kids disrespected me, was I able to rally myself to look at them and think, is something wrong? Was I able to see what was going on with other people rather than get completely wrapped up in my own reactivity and my own little hurt feelings and my little ego drama? Did I do that today? If I did, the day did not suck. If I didn't, well, I'll have another opportunity tomorrow. Now, how do we live life as a transformational moment? This is not easy, guys. This is like spiritual Hercules. You know, well, many of us think that spirituality means that we walk around chanting Om all day, and I haven't noticed that, because what I've noticed is the more we evolve, the bigger the challenges that come towards us that we are supposed to deal with in a bigger way. You know, just when I think that I've got some command over my own energy fields, like somebody or something is going to happen, and whoosh, I'm back into negativity. And I can sit there and say, look what they did to me, which is of course my first reaction. And then the second reaction is when I use it as a transformational moment. I say, well, where's the weakness in me that I got so knocked off my game again? Gee, what's going on with me? How can I transform that? God, help. Life is a struggle. And because it is a struggle, we are given endless opportunities, moment by moment, to transform. They're endless. It's like when we retire. And suddenly we're getting sicker and sicker. We're losing capacities, or our brains start to... I'm waiting for my brain to start to disintegrate. Mm-hmm. I just can't wait for that transformational moment. The only part of me that works is my mind. You know, my body gave up 50 years ago, but you know, how that's going to be some transformational moment when I can't think anymore, and I'm going to sit there and think, how am I going to overcome my negative feelings towards myself now? Now, let's look at the struggle of life. Those people who think that if it's meant to be, it'll be easy and just flow, they have completely missed the point. Because if your life is just flowing and everything is easy, you're not living, and you're not taking on the spiritual challenge of being alive. It's not real. I mean, I've heard this over and over and over. I knew it was meant to be because it just flowed. Yes. Yes, when I went to that bar and I got picked up by that guy and we went home together, it just flowed. I just tell you, flowed. Anyway, I'm sure that's not what they meant. But I'm not saying that things don't ever just come together easily. I mean, that's great. We have these moments, but that isn't the purpose of life. The purpose of life isn't to... The purpose of our spirituality isn't to make life easier. The purpose of our spirituality is to make us tougher, so that we can take on more of the challenges. And why? But we'll get to that. Because there's a very important reason that life is tough and that our challenges are there. That has to do with the design of the universe. It's not about me and the ease of my life. It's about me as an aspect of consciousness in the process of evolution. That's why life is tough. Because if there's no challenge, there's no evolution. There's no need for evolution. So without struggle, without challenge, there would be no need to alter our reactions and evolve into a new state of being. We would stagnate if everything went our way every day. In fact, those people who have a tendency to be domineering, who make everybody do what they want, are not growing. Because they don't have anybody standing in their face saying, you know, you're a schmuck. And you really ought to take a look at that. They say, yes, Daddy. Whatever you say, Daddy. Even if that Daddy is God. So, while transformation is the purpose of existence, at the same time, if we believe that life is an illusion, that there is no reality, we're also missing the point. Of course there's a reality. You stub your toe, you'd recognize reality. You have nerve endings in your toe because you're in physical form, and you stub that against the wall, that's in physical form, and it exists. But our interpretation of reality is what is subjective. Doesn't mean reality doesn't exist. Simply means that we have a subjective interpretation of what reality is. That's the part we get to change. We can't change reality. We can only change our subjective interpretation of it. So that's what it's about, is how we continue to change our interpretation of reality so that we become more at peace with it, so that we are able to deal with it better. And it doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, whatever bad means, but we look at what bad means and we try to understand, well, what do I mean when I say that was bad? Why is that so painful? My mother will die. Why is that so painful? Rather than saying, oh, my mother is dying, oh my God, that's really painful. Why is it painful? There may be a very important reason why it's painful. But what is it? More consciousness, more self-awareness. How do we deal with that pain? How do we transform that experience? It's very important for us to accept that there's more than one way to interpret anything that is happening and not get locked into a particular view of it. Because sometimes those views are helpful and supportive and sometimes they're damaging and detrimental. And to keep an open mind, something may have been a perfect way of interpreting something at this moment, and the next moment, that interpretation is no longer valuable to us. I'm going to give you an example that just popped into my head. Let's say you're married to an alcoholic. And every day you go to God and say, am I supposed to stay in this relationship? And God says yes. And you say, why? And God says, well, because you're learning something. And what am I learning? Well, I'm learning not to be merged because I never know when he's going to be drunk and when he's going to be sober. And so there it is. I have to be willing to be on my own and deal with that never-ending drama and trauma of living with a practicing drunk. And then, so then you get into thinking, this is a great way to live. I am really a noble person because I am living with a drunk. And I'm developing my autonomy so that I can live with a drunk. And now supposing that becomes your new gig, and now you know how to live with a drunk, but you don't know how to live with someone who's sober because you don't really know how to be in a relationship with someone who can relate to you. Well, then all of a sudden that same thing that was God-like yesterday, which said, you are learning, Beth, you are learning to live with a drunk, now becomes an excuse to not grow anymore. Woo! You can't even trust these damn transformational moments to stay the same. And then suddenly you realize you're hanging on to a dead relationship because you don't want to take the next step and learn the next thing. Then you have to let it go. Still, now, clinging desperately to our stories, interpretations, and reactions, we still engage in life as though it were a battle to assert our will over mind, matter, and the process of living. This is a battle that cannot be won, but can only lead us into further stress and despair. Because I'm talking about this like we have a choice. Like we really have a choice to be an allowance about life. Like we don't have a choice because life is too big. It's bigger than we are. Because our children will not behave. Because our wife will not do what we want. Or our husband will not do what we want. Because our boss won't do what we want. Or the economy won't do what we want. If we are to find our way through the maze of conflict, stress, and struggle that seems to define our very existence, we have to be willing to see transformation as the point of life and to embrace every experience as the mechanism through which that gift is granted. Now, I'd like to speak a little bit now about another piece of becoming, which is there is no this or that. This is, once we are beginning to get all this, we say, all right, well, how do we live differently? How do we do it? We actually tune in to what the transformation for this moment is. And that is what we do. That's what we focus on. I'm in this marriage today because I need to let go of this. As soon as I do, I'm in the next moment. I cannot be prepared for the next moment until I take on this moment fully and thoroughly. So just when we think we've gotten a grasp of it, it changes. But it doesn't change because the world is fickle. It changes because we need the next transformation. And we are ready for the next transformation. What I'm talking about is, for example, we get up in the morning and we say, what should I do? And I give an example about this in the book. Should I walk the dogs? Should I do my taxes? Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do the other thing? And normally in our heads we have an agenda. Oh my God, I've got to get this report done by 10 o'clock and therefore I need to start on it now. And so we go straight towards that. But that isn't true. There's only one right thing that we should do when we get up in the morning. And that's what God tells us we should do when we get up in the morning. And that may be I need to meditate. Because if I don't meditate, I won't be able to write that report. And if I write the report, it'll be wrong because I've been too stressed. Or the impact of having read that report and getting it in at 10, it's all irrelevant because the boss is late to the meeting anyway. And when we begin to become becoming and we start to become divinely guided, then we know that even those agendas of the moment from when I get up in the morning are not in my hands, and they need to be in the hands of God that tells me what transformational moment I'm in right now. What do I need to do? And it may be meditate, it may be walk the dog, it may be eat breakfast, it may be get started on this report right now. And there are times when everything's the opposite of the way you think it's supposed to be. God will say to me, all right, Beth, get up. It's 3 in the morning and start working on this flyer. And I'll think, what the hell am I writing this flyer at 3 in the morning instead of sleeping, which seems like the spiritual thing to do is to be spiritually prepared, is to sleep and meditate and everything. Well, then it turns out that 7 o'clock rolls around and it needs to be done, and I didn't even know it. And there it is, I've done it. And I didn't know why I did it. This happens to me all the time. I'm guided to do something. I don't know why I'm doing it then. It seems insane, and then it becomes very obvious why. So it's on that level, but it's also on a different level, and this is really important, is we cannot be where we aren't. There is only this. There is only now. There is only where we are at the moment. We are always trying to be somewhere else, someone else. And what that means is we're trying to change our consciousness, our state of consciousness. In the beginning of this book, I started talking to you about how we very rarely deal with reality, that what we're always trying to do is change our feeling state. I feel uncomfortable, I feel anxious. Why? We very rarely ask ourselves, why do I really feel anxious? I'm in a session, why am I looking at my watch? Well, what's making me uncomfortable? What makes me want to get out of here? And then I look at that, can breathe through it, and there's a transformational moment. But what we're always trying to change is our feeling state. So when we are trying to achieve a goal, or get there, or do that, or whatever it is, what we're trying to do is feel something that we want to feel, that we think is going to be better. But we can't feel that. We cannot be in that state of consciousness without shifting our state of consciousness. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're at the dentist and you're having your teeth drilled that you wouldn't rather be at the beach. That is something external that will, God willing, sometime end. But most of life isn't like that. And even there, to try to get into a state of relaxation when you're at the dentist is to make the best of that situation. To be able to find the peace in the discomfort is another transformational moment. But if we're always trying to change our feeling state, we will never want to be here, now, in the moment, because we're uncomfortable. And we think that that resolution will come when I get married, or when I finish this, or whatever it is that we think that is going to happen. And we're trying to change our feeling state. And that's why we have to follow divine guidance, because God knows, or the source, or higher consciousness, how to change our feeling state is to transform us. And we can't be there until we're here. Until we get through everything that this experience has to offer. And that when we are being divinely guided, we are being guided through the transformation, not through the problem. We're not being guided to some external goal. We're being guided through the inner transformation. And yet we can see so logically how often we go rushing off into something in a state of stress and anxiety because our anxiety tells us that is how we're going to end our anxiety, rather than exercising, which will release our anxiety, meditating, which may release our anxiety, eating a good breakfast, doing a release, reading Living with Reality, getting on a support call. Many, many other things will truly release our anxiety. And then when we go to do our taxes, or we go to take on that next challenge, we're already relaxed. We're not relaxed because we finished it. We relax before we go into it. Or at least we try. We move in that direction. We deal with the causes of our anxieties when we start to deal with life as a transformational moment. Now I get into much more detail about there being no here or there, and no now or then. But what I would like to, because I want to move ahead. Would you mind turning off your phone? Thank you. The biggest transformational moment, challenge, is who we are. The biggest transformational challenge we have is who we are. I want to say that at least 2 more times. The biggest transformational challenge we have is who we are. The biggest transformational challenge we have is who we are. I did say that twice more. I can be done now? Thank you. We are the challenge. You know, I've met the enemy and it is I, right? Yeah. I am the challenge. My reactivity is the challenge. Now, this is the great news. This is the way it's meant to be. There's no shame in it. We are part of the collective consciousness in the process of evolution. We are an aspect of God in the process of evolution. The way I put it is that it is God that is evolving, and I am an aspect of God evolving. And when you speak about karma, the way I have understood it, karma is collective, because we are not individual units. We are aspects of divine consciousness. Now we're really getting into the higher levels of becoming, when we really stop shifting, because even this has been based on ego consciousness. Wait till we get to the next level, when we are no longer seeing ourselves from the perspective of the ego, but we start to see ourselves from the perspective of the whole. If you think of the cell of your body from the perspective of the body, as opposed to thinking of the body from the perspective of the cell, then you have made the shift into a new state of consciousness and truly becoming. Now what that means is that each one of us is still wandering around thinking that we are separate individuals who are going about our lives trying to get better. But God told me 30 years ago there's no personal salvation, so don't bother. And I said, well, I don't get it. You know, what's the point of all of this? And God said, you know, it's the whole that is evolving. How can you be saved? You don't even exist. It's like taking that cell out of the body and trying to give it meaning. It dies. It has no meaning anymore. And so, of course, we exist on some physical level as discrete, individuated aspects of the divine consciousness. But we are still individual, so as the cell is an individuated aspect of the divine consciousness. But it is really the whole that exists, and we are part of it. And so when we look at that, then we say, how could I have my individual karma? It's not mine. It's not my private property. Karma, cause and effect, as I define it, is the energy that attracts to us the lessons we need to learn. This is the energy that we collectively need. By the way, if you guys aren't comfortable on those chairs, there are some more comfy ones right here. You okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Karma is collective. We as a whole, we as humanity, have to learn to work through the ego-based consciousness with which we were born, with which we are imbued. And each one of us has an aspect of that to work on. And you could say, well, there was a past life, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, oh my God, that's our present life. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 700 years ago, and I remember it, and you may. And maybe it was you, maybe it wasn't you. Maybe you just remember it. Because you're an aspect of that collective consciousness that is in the process of clearing that karma. And it's all symbolic, it's all metaphor anyway. Every past life, every present life is a metaphor for a constellation of energy, a way of being that we are in the process of transforming together. And each one of us has a part. So you get to be the alcoholic, and you get to be the overeater, and you're the one who has cancer, and you're the one who's mentally ill, and you're the one who's depressed, and you're the one who gets to be the rich kid, and you're the one who gets to be the bum. And all of us together are working out aspects of the divine consciousness, taking on the challenges and transforming. If we could only get this, shame would disappear. And all that would be left would be the energy of going towards the transformation. All right, what do I get to take on now? For the whole. Oh, I was a jerk today. Fantastic. I get to look at that energy and see what I can do about it. And I'm doing it for God. Not like I'm doing it, God, please forgive me for having been a jerk today. But it's like, all right, God, you were a jerk today. What are we going to do about it? Do you understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. You see, everything flips over. And suddenly, we are the fingers and the hands. We are truly aspects of God that are in the process of evolving. Because God is evolving, because the whole is evolving. And we get to take on our part. Now, in the book I go into what do we do about these weaknesses and our flaws, and the different ways that we can deal with those challenges. But there's nothing shameful. Whatever you think is wrong with you is meant to be. If you've done the same stupid thing 100 times, great. No problem. You get to say, wow, I did that again. I wonder why. God, you're having a tough day. But what can I do? You don't just sit there and say, oh, well, I did that the 100th time today. Oh, well, I'm a schmuck, and I guess I just might as well have another drink. The job is to take it on, to take on that transformation. That's the job. So there is no shame anymore. And if we could just drop the shame, we would speed up our evolution dramatically. Because then we would stop hiding from self-awareness. Then we would stop being afraid of the powerful divine energies that are here to support us. Then we would stop running away from people who can see through us. I want someone to see through me so that they can see what the hell I'm doing, so that they can help me. Sometimes. Sometimes. But when I'm in that ego-based thing, it's like, oh my God, they're going to see me. They're going to see this terrible thing about me. Oh, I'm so ashamed. Or, I don't want to change that. I'm comfortable. I like that. Oh, do I really have to change? So you get to be the fragment of consciousness that doesn't want to change. It takes a village. Then you're the personification of the energy of not wanting to change, the energy of resistance. What is more important to take on than the energy of resistance? So you're just doing your job, saying, oh, I resisted all year. Wow, I'm really doing my job. And now, having done that, am I sick of it? Am I ready to let it go? But you're doing your job for the whole collective. I'm not kidding. I don't always feel that way when I'm the other side. When I'm the person who's being hurt by your behavior, then I lose all the spirituality. And it's like, are you doing that again? It's like, I don't say, isn't that wonderful, darling? You did that again. You're still stepping on my foot. It's broken. Wonderful. This is another transformational moment for both of us. But we can try. Okay, now, this all leads up to number 4. The 4th level of becoming is being guided by divine consciousness. And of course, that's where this is all going, where the whole book is going, where this platform is going, where everybody is going, where we hope everybody is going. And I have in here, finally, a definition of becoming, wherever I do have it. Oh yes, here it is. Becoming is living life as a process, guided by higher consciousness for the purpose of collective evolution. I'm going to read that sentence again. Becoming is living life as a process, guided by higher consciousness for the purpose of collective evolution. In so doing, we unleash the power of the source on the planet. Becoming is living life as a process, guided by higher consciousness for the purpose of collective evolution. In so doing, we unleash the power of the source on this planet. And what I mean by this is, and of course, again, I go into much more detail in the book. When we begin to understand life as a transformational moment, we're really ready to take that next step, which is to see ourselves as aspects of the divine. And in order to fully realize ourselves that way, we need to ask for divine guidance. Instead of being identified with the ego fighting the divine, we become identified with the divine, supporting the ego, supporting all of us in the process of transformation. In this way, we unleash the power of the source on the planet. I just want to speak a bit about that. This is a state of consciousness that cannot be verbalized, although we can talk about it. I'm sure that every one of you has had experiences where you felt at one, even if it was a fleeting moment, where you just felt yourself as a vibrational energy. There are people who have not yet had that experience, but it is as real as eating breakfast. Once you're able to access that state of consciousness, you know it exists. When you're in that state of consciousness, you become a conduit for the divine, because you are no longer identifying with the ego that feels it's as separate. Because separation, ultimately, from ourselves, from each other, is ultimately separation from the divine. God told me in the early 80s that God is no further from me than the nose on my face, because God is the nose on my face. That I didn't have to change to connect to God, that I didn't have to strive to connect to God, that God is the nose on my face because God and I are one. And it is so difficult to live in ego-based consciousness and believe that, because we feel so powerless. Everything I talk about is how powerless we are. And we are. But we're only powerless insofar as we are thinking from the perspective of the ego. When we are identifying with the divine consciousness itself, we don't see ourselves as powerless because we don't see ourselves anymore. We're not looking at ourselves. We are not measuring ourselves. We're not comparing ourselves. We're not thinking about ourselves. We're in a state of becoming where we feel imbued with divine energy and we become channels of divine consciousness. And there is a feeling of relaxation that goes with that. Relaxation and joy. Even though things can be very tough and very painful. There's a faith and there's a trust that goes beyond words, that goes beyond, oh, I know this is going to work out okay. It's because you don't think anymore about whether or not it's going to work out okay. Because you don't think about whether or not it's going to work out. It's because there is no it to work out. Because you're just in that moment, in that space where you feel imbued with that divine consciousness and you are guided moment by moment and you have no choices anymore. As I shared with you guys, I think some time ago, I had my spiritual awakening in a 12-step program in 1978. And the third step was to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God, as we understood God. And at that point, I started hearing God's voice, and then the masters, and whatever those voices really are, whatever they represent. And it was a complete shock to me. But God said to me, when you make the decision to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, which was my version then. It was still a bit of an ego-based version of what I now understand is to become an agent of divine consciousness, to become a channel of God's peace, like it says in the St. Francis prayer. All of that I intuitively grasped in the moment that I took that step in that 12-step program. God told me, when you make that decision, you never have to make another decision for the rest of your life. And it's true, because you become guided moment by moment. And it's no longer, I ask God, is it for the highest good of all, including me, to do this, which is what we learn in Platform 4. It becomes, the new prayer becomes, would it most effectively unleash the power of the Source on this planet for me to do this? Because it's no longer about, how is this going to work out for me? How is this going to work out for you? It's, what does God want? How am I a part of the divine plan? Or whatever you want to call it. You don't like God? It really doesn't matter to me. You know, use any word. Divine consciousness. It's whatever that is. It's that you feel when you have those moments. I want to see, when I say I want to see, I know that I didn't create this in myself. I did not create the urge to become a spiritual teacher. I did not create in myself the obsession with spiritual consciousness and self-awareness. I am an agent of divine consciousness that is on the planet. Bringing this message, not because it's my message, but because this is what divine consciousness would have me do. And whether you like it or you don't like it is of no matter to me. That's giving up all horizontal relationships, because ultimately, in order to be an agent of divine consciousness, we have to be able to transform beyond our need for people. And it doesn't mean we don't have people, because we have them in glorious new ways. But we are not driven by that need. I cannot be driven by the need for James' love, or Jim's love, or Helena's love, or approval. I can't be driven by that. I need to be, if you want to use the word driven, by the impulse that comes through me from divine consciousness. And when that happens, I'm in what I call vertical relationship. And in that way, I can find you, because you and I are one. I can feel you. I can go into the heart of you and feel connected to everything that exists. But I'm doing it through my connection to the whole. Not this way, where I become dependent on you, and people say, don't teach this, don't say that, you're antagonizing people, you're driving out your clients, you're this and that, you know, I don't like this, and you know, you just don't care. You really don't care, because you're not being motivated by that. And I will tell you this, that if you, and as you, I don't want to say if, as you make this transformation, and it takes a lot of hard work, but it is possible to become more and more agents of divine consciousness, there will be people who will not understand you and will not understand your motives. And they won't like it. Or they won't like you anymore because you're not merging with them anymore. You're not puffing up their egos or going along with what they want or playing out their games because you don't have the same need to do that. This is not a morality thing. I mean, you just don't need it in the same way, and so you just don't do it. And people may not like you. And that's really just too bad, isn't it? Because then you don't, it's about unleashing the power of the source. And that's what becoming is really about. Because the power of the source is so strong that when you connect to it, you feel it. And it feels so whole. And then your ego wants to be a part of that. And you've trained it and retrained it to stop being that 2-year-old brat that's always trying to run the show. And you've said to your ego, this is what will give us joy. And it begins to have that experience. Oh yes, I am so much happier when I'm in the flow and I feel connected to Source. I don't want that anymore. I don't want anything counterfeit. I don't need the food. I don't need the alcohol. I don't even need the sex. I don't mean that we don't have sex. But we don't, someone had that idea that we don't have sex in the street. Oh yeah, it came up, why not? Sacred union. But it becomes guided by the Source. That everything you do becomes guided by the Source, and you feel integrity through your whole being because you know you've stopped selling yourself out. So you can say, well, what's the point of doing living with reality? Is my life going to get easier? No. But you will become more and more an agent of divine consciousness, and you will become happier, more fulfilled, just because it feels better. And you feel integrity. You have integrity. And connection. And wonderful, energetic experiences. And you feel like you're of service. You know, finally, that you can help. And you look at suffering, and it doesn't completely overwhelm you anymore. Because in our own individual ego states, the amount of suffering that surrounds us is so vast, it feels almost unbearable to live with. Not just our own suffering. Everyone's suffering. The dogs, the animals suffering. The whole planet. All the suffering we have. And when you're in a state of divine consciousness, you can bear it. And you can be of service. And you have something to give that goes beyond you. That's an incredible experience. And all it takes is working your ass off. To practice these platforms, to do your spiritual work, to do life force, to do whatever else you're doing, yoga, whatever it is that brings you into alignment. To keep confronting our individual and collective weaknesses. And we can do this together. Very few of us can do this alone. Because we are one. We don't have to do it alone. We're not supposed to do it alone. We're meant to do it as a collective because it's all about the process of collective transformation. It's not about me anymore. In August, we are having, this is August 2012, whenever you're watching this video, we are having a retreat called Creating the Collective Vortex of Change. Are you in? We need a collective vortex of change. Coming from our efforts collectively, united and guided by the divine, which is working through us. Whatever you think is the reason you showed up today has nothing to do with whatever you think got you to show up today. It's the divine. Something called you here today, or wherever you go for your true spiritual nurturing. And some people will be called to this retreat to create the collective vortex of change. That God, the divine, is impelling, not us. So it's not all on us. Either we have been programmed for transformation, or it won't happen anyway. Either it's part of the plan, or it isn't going to happen. We can relax. We can watch. I would like to speak very, very briefly to a personal thing, and then I'd like to take a break and see if we can't. Well, I think maybe you're already feeling it. I'm feeling powerful energies, right? We didn't even have to try, because it's just coming through. Together in this collective, we're already creating a collective vortex of change. There have been people in our community who have misunderstood some of my behavior. And I want to address this now because this is the moment, as we have come to becoming, that it is not personal. If I have gone out of my way to help you once or 100 times, you don't owe me anything. I have not done it for you. It's always been, God tells me, do this, and I do it. Either I'm told to answer the phone, or I'm told not to answer the phone. I'm told to open my home, or I'm told not to open my home. I'm told to sit and listen and work when it's 3 in the morning and I feel like I'm going to die, or I'm told to go to sleep. It's all not personal. And so, if I have done anything for you, you owe me nothing. And if you think I'm doing more for someone else, you're mistaken. I am not doing anything for anyone else. There is no favoritism. It's all guided. If I am investing time in someone, it's not because I like them more or less. It's because I'm guided to do that for whatever purpose, which I don't understand. Maybe it's part of my transformation. Maybe it's part of theirs. Maybe it's for our community. We have some gems, wonderful people here. And any part that I have played in your evolution is God investing in you, just as you invest in me. So I'd like you to let go, just take a moment to let go of any of those thoughts that you've had. And I know that they have been here about favoritism, or me liking somebody, or you're no good, or why does she, or which is perfectly normal and understandable. I'm sure I would feel the same way. And understand that it's not personal. Because it's all about our collective evolution. And you're being given the experiences you need to have. And the support you need to have to overcome what you need. And you are given many opportunities for incredible amount of support that you will be divinely guided to reach out to. I do not feel like taking a break. If anyone, I don't feel guided to, but if you need to go, I'm just going to sit here. And definitely, please do use this moment. We have 2 bathrooms downstairs, as you know, that are open, and 2 up here. And let's just be silent.
That's right. Which must be so you have a rule.
The time is now.
Yes. The time is now.
The time is now.
Thank you.